Alright, hello ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to just be breaking down a little bit of r/EndTipping. Now, a little bit of a background on me if you haven't seen anything else on my channel. I am a server in the restaurant industry and I advocate for tipping. I advocate for tipping 20% in professional restaurant settings and other restaurant environments. Alright? I know I'm biased, but I know tipping culture is getting out of control, and we're going to go through r/EndTipping because they can see that too. Now, again, I'm not trying to discourage you from tipping, and I'm also not trying to say that you should tip every single person that asks for a tip, no matter their base wage, but I'm saying, as a server, you don't make actual money, you're paid only in tips, and you have to pay out other people with those tips. So the 20% rule exists because you as a person are not actually getting paid 20% tips. But I figure, in spite of that little breakdown, we are just going to get into this and go through some of the insanity that is some of the tipping culture baloney right now. And yeah, even I, who is biased and wants to be able to tip and get tipped because that's my wage, can see that some of this is absolutely insane. So we're just going to get into it. There is also pinned at the top a list of tip-free restaurants. We've checked that out, but this person's 20% tip wasn't acceptable enough. Last week, I was paying for a nice dinner out, and the waiter brought out a card reader to our table. I hate that, by the way. I hate when they bring the card reader to the table. I like when they just take the check and go to a POS system and, leave me alone. But, that's petty. I'm sorry. And he sneakily canceled the transaction after he saw I only tipped 20%, gave me a dirty look, then claimed it didn't go through and I needed to try again. So, I don't understand this. I don't think it makes that much sense. I have had a lot of cards decline, by the way, on me but usually in certain settings, they don't have that you can pick 20%, 15%, 25%. I've actually worked at places where people just fill in the tip manually, which means a lot of the time you get really badly undertipped. But, that is kind of the spielio dealio. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that is not appropriate. If that's actually the case, and obviously you don't know the perspective of certain individuals versus other individuals when it comes to their opinions online, but in general, there's no way that they should be, canceling transactions to try and score more money for whatever means. It is a little bit ridiculous, but then we get a little bit deeper into here, and now it's going to get a little bit more interesting. I get it, you gotta pay your bills, but I'm of the opinion that tipping should be proportional to how much attention our table needs. 20% is generous for two people who are in and out in 30 minutes and don't have special requests or accommodations and generally don't waste time. Totally true. Honestly, even if somebody pops in for 20, 30 minutes, they still pay 20% on top of their base bill, no matter what the bill is. That is not indecent at all. The fact that this person, and I'm hoping that they just had a card issue or something, but it's obvious, with Toast and with other handheld devices, you can tell when they cancel transactions. So I would be more inclined to believe this person than if somebody's getting a card reader not working at a POS system, which we have. We have card reader issues a lot of the time, but even so, transactions don't get canceled. They just don't go through in general, and then somebody just gets another card, puts it in the machine, bada bing, bada boom, we're all good to go. But this seems like some baloney, my dudes. So, it's really unfortunate, because again, this is the insanity that's going to make people not tip, and it's going to topple the whole restaurant industry at this point. The tip credit law does guarantee minimum wage. Now, this is the thing. I have seen this. There is a basically in government and there's a federal law basically. You do have to get, if you only make $2.13 an hour, your wage to be bumped up to the minimum wage of your state if you do not make that money up in tips as a server, as a tipped worker. The thing I'm trying to tell you, though, is you will never be able to do this most of the time. A lot of the time, you're going to have to assess this at the end of the year because your tips are not consistent. So, as much as it is true that if you were to hypothetically make under minimum wage, your wage will get tipped up, and tipped up, I mean, by your employer, not by, people who are tipping you. You can't really get away with doing it in most restaurants until basically the end of either your payroll or the year. And usually it's later. It's not your payroll. It's usually the end of the year, which means that the likelihood of you actually being able to survive a year with only $2.13 an hour or less, if you can't make up to minimum wage, is almost impossible. This is why this doesn't work, and this is actually part of the problem when it comes to being a server and a tipped worker and trying to, kind of cope with getting tipped and dealing with the insanity that is tipping in spite of you actually being, proposed this ethereal, wage top up if you aren't tipped enough. It doesn't actually work. From what I've seen, it doesn't actually work. From the people that I've met, it doesn't actually work. There were times where I wouldn't make any money in a shift, just so you know. No money. $0. $0. And I'm not kidding when I say this. The next shift, you make under minimum wage. Sucks for you. They're not going to top it off. They do not top it off. There have been many jobs where I've worked basically for free and had to hope to God that the next shift will top up enough to compensate for the hours that I've lost. I'm not kidding. So this law does not really exist. I could be wrong. This might not be the same law, but I'm very certain this is the same law. Double service fee. This looks terrible. I hope this is not where I'm at. This must be like California or something. This can't be real. So they got a glass of rosé. They got, some Sazeracs. They got some alcohol, basically. And then they got like a menu, like a 2-person menu. And, it's a pricey thing. And then they have employee benefits contribution 4%, which I don't know what that would consist of, but that's another $9.40. And then they have the subtotal, which is the service fee charge. Now, that's 20%. Sorry, I didn't scroll down. They have the 20% charge, which is $47. Now, I don't know what in the name of God this employee benefit contribution is. I've never worked at a restaurant that does this, but the thing is, they do have auto gratuity 20%. So that is saying something, and that's not indecent in my personal opinion. Like, again, you racked a bill, and the people are probably gonna have to pay tip out on this and do all the things that they have to do just so that they can get some money. That $47 they're getting is not gonna be $47. And then also, this is interesting. This is a before tax tip. This is a before tax tip, which is very interesting. I do not know exactly where this location is. I wonder. It's in Chicago. Interesting. Oh, no tipping policy at cafe in Indianapolis. And for some reason I can appreciate this. One, with cafes, again, you're not going to be able to make a significant sum of money as a tipped worker in some instances unless the place is really busy. And I think that those kinds of places should actually give a base wage. And they just literally just come down hard. Tipping can feel awkward. We are motivated by autonomy. Tipping can often create competition between employees. It's true. We are all envious when the other person has a better table than you. Tipping is super sexist. I don't believe in that. And then they're like 70% of all tipped workers are women who are forced to live on tips and compelled to tolerate inappropriate behavior to make a living. I mean, honestly, it just depends. I've also worked with a bunch of men who get horribly undertipped. So sure, you could say it's sexist, but it might just be because your hiring managers actually tend to hire women because they're considered more approachable in a customer service setting. It just depends. It's also based on experience, and it depends on the restaurant that you're working at. I don't really like to just throw around percentages because although 70% of all tipped workers are women, it's not just the 70% that get horribly undertipped and have to cope. But at the same time, that's it's part of the industry. I do know more women, I find, than men who are servers, but at my restaurant, it's about 50-50, so it really just depends on the place, and also, what restaurant are you talking about? Obviously, if we're talking about a Hooters, then it's going to be a lot more women than at maybe, another fine dining restaurant of some kind. And then, obviously, the employer should be responsible for employees' wages. In my opinion, that should be true. That's just kind of like the breakdown for this. Obviously, it's just like a little no tipping sign.
What's your take?
If I have to go up to order, I'm not tipping. Restaurants are all they're all self-serve now.
0%.
So if there's no, they're not taking your order, they're not running drinks, they're not, pouring wine for you, they're not taking care of you, they're not coursing out your meals, they're not firing your orders so that your food hits the table in a timely manner, they're not doing dessert, they're not bringing you the check, they're not doing normal things that even low-scale restaurants will do, they're not going to be worthy of a tip. They're probably paid some sort of base wage. This is my issue. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's a really high-end or low-end place, but there are some variables that do dictate you being worthy of a tip as a tipped worker, and in my personal opinion, it has to involve, at the very least, taking the food order. Tip your valet. To be fair, I have worked with valet, and I have to tell you, they don't make a lot of money. They make basically tips. just tips. They usually get hired out like as a third party or like privately, and then they get tips, and also they tip pool. That's the kind of valet I've worked with, and it sucks. They really, like, a lot of the time they don't make a lot of money, but there is like a $2 fee, I think, that starts just so that they don't have to pay additionally. I don't think it makes up their wage, though. It's for something else. It's like just service fees, basically, so that the company they work for makes money, and then they get paid the tips. And so that's why, and a lot of people will tip the valet $5. So if they say do, 75 cars in a night, that's not indecent, but then you also have to tip pool amongst like 1, 2, or 3 people. So it does depend. We will have to check this out for a different video. Popular YouTube comedians discuss tipping on a wedding dress at self-checkout. I'm not tipping on a wedding dress now. I'd rather be skinned alive. If somebody designs something for me or does for me something very deliberate, I have no issue paying additionally for a good service. Never a problem. But again, like, why is it not calculated into the base? Why is the labor, the laborious effort, and the input not calculated into the base? That's something that's bothersome. All right, so there's a kitchen service charge. Kitchen service charge, 6% kitchen service charge, and expect 18 to 25% tip. And this is 1 large gumbo, 3-piece Alaskan cotton chips, basically some food, and then there's a service charge for the kitchen. And then you've got yourself the total and blah, blah, blah. And that's unfortunate because it's also going to make people not want to tip the actual server who's going to get paid $2.13 an hour. But restaurant staff are not tipped workers. Restaurant staff do have to get paid usually a base wage because I think most of the time you're not even allowed to accept tips. A tipped worker is allowed to accept tips, but a non-tipped worker usually can't get actually given tips. I've tried, actually. I've had people try and give me money to give to the kitchen before, and the kitchen staff usually decline it because they're not supposed to be accepting money like that. They get paid a base wage. But I guess you can argue it for a percentage in that it's not actually a tip, it's a service fee. So I'm very curious. This is interesting. What would you consider a fair minimum wage if tipping were abolished? And then you've got this right here. So what would you consider a fair minimum wage if tipping were abolished? So the main verdict from 121 people is $15 to $19.99 per hour. But then you've got 42 people saying $25 plus an hour, blah, blah, blah. I think it should scale again with the restaurant, honestly, because there are some restaurants that make way more money and then others that do not make very much. So if you put a base wage for all of it, it wouldn't make any sense. Even if you go on to Indeed right now, you as an individual, go on to Indeed, look up serving jobs. Depending on the value and the scale and the upscale to non-upscale elements of the restaurant, you can find they all pay different things even though it's all tipped. And that's because usually it's the total bill that people tip on. That means your total wage goes up the more expensive and the more classy the restaurant. So obviously you don't want to be working at like a tiny little cafe or like, just like a dive bar or something. You want to be working at like a steakhouse. Steakhouses and like, places like that, really expensive, like Italian places, things like that. That is where the money is at. So you want to constantly be like moving up the ladder in some regard, which is one reason why the whole like tipping, like the set amount of tipping might be a problem for some people, might be a problem in general. Again, like, should it all be one base pay or should it be dependent on your actual value? Because there are certain other places, like as a restaurant, certain restaurants, you don't do bottle service. You don't have to augment cocktails. Should they get paid $20 an hour and then you also get paid $20 an hour? It also doesn't incentivize you being any more skillful. So I just think it depends. But this is a fair minimum wage. So obviously then they would have to bring it up even more. I don't know how that would work. This could actually ruin the economy now that I'm thinking about it. I mean, playing with minimum wage is a terrible idea. I think the higher minimum wage goes, the more economically taxed a system would be, right? That I'm very much able to be incorrect about. That's just what I've seen. But more from firsthand experience, like, as soon as the minimum wage goes up, it's usually reactionary to, like, and this was in Canada, so obviously we have a slightly different economic system. But the thing I've seen is everything just gets more expensive when minimum wage goes up, and it's harder to get jobs. It is harder to get jobs as well. So I don't know how this would help. I don't think it would help, really, but I could be wrong. Anyways, that was the video. We can go through more if you guys are interested, but that was r/EndTipping. Check it out. It's quite an interesting, like, surplus, and I do agree with some of the people on here. I do agree with some of the people on r/end tipping, but I do think we need to make some distinctions between actual like restaurant service and just like going to McDonald's again or going to somewhere else and having somebody do basically no work and expect a 15 to 25% tip. So yeah, that was my opinion. You know, it wasn't the perfect opinion, obviously. Do judge away in the comments below. Tell me what you think in the comments below. But I have to say, there is a distinction in my opinion, which is why I'm really trying to kind of drive home a balance here. It's not 0 or 100. It's not black or white. It's pretty gray. So just take it in stride, take a look at it, and check out r/end tipping if you want. But yeah, hopefully that was a sensible kind of position to have. I know that I'm biased, but at the same time, there are some instances where the tipping's just getting totally ridiculous. So, I don't know. But anyways, that is the video. I hope you all enjoyed. Tell me what you think in the comments below. And if I'm wrong or if I'm right or what you think about tipping, what do you think about tipping culture and r/end tipping. So yeah, that was the video, my people. I hope you all enjoyed. And yeah, I will see you next time. Slater.